You may have heard of Joycon drift before, but I bet you never heard of the PS5 controller's dead trigger. Here's everything you need to know about the PS5 dead trigger. You see, I've had my PS5 for a couple months now, and I have yet to read about the dead adaptive triggers on the PS5 controllers. So let me explain. A couple months back, I received my PS5, maybe December of last year. Now, here we are in May, here we are in May, and my right trigger is dead. Now, what does that mean? Does it work? Yes, it still works. The biggest issue is that the adaptiveness does not work. So although my left works, my right doesn't. And now you may think, well, what does that mean for the trigger? Well, currently, I can't show you this, but my adaptive controller has force still, whereas my right trigger, it's just loose. It's very loose. Now, I've read that very few people have complained about this. I'm one of the few that have gotten this issue. And so now my question is, how do we get this fixed? And what the problem is with these adaptive triggers? Why is this happening? It seems like the taptic mechanism within the adaptive trigger is just blowing out. Now, it's not like I'm doing some crazy special thing that is causing this to happen. The adaptive trigger was just being used every day, and in some games, the adaptiveness wasn't even working. The taptic engine is not really a full feature yet in most games. For instance, when you play Hitman 3, there's no difference between the trigger on this controller on the DualSense versus a DualShock. An article by Comic Book is one of the few articles that I've seen about the dead trigger. They state last month we reported issues on the stick drift, and now users on Reddit and YouTube are reporting the adaptive triggers on their controller are breaking and becoming loose. Right now it appears the problem is uncommon, and it appears to be the result of the trigger's spring becoming loose. You see, when you play with the DualSense controller on certain games, such as Astro's Playroom or NBA, you're going to feel this weird sensation where the controller is used to feel like you're doing something. And this is very hard to explain. But basically, this is the first time I've ever felt any controller allow you to feel a part of the game. It adds another sense. Now, you probably heard this before. You probably felt it before at Target or something, or if you have one yourself. What the trigger does, if you don't know, is that it adapts to the conditions. For instance, in NBA, if you're running and you're out of energy, the trigger becomes harder to press. It almost like stops. Imagine as if there's a stop and you have to press even harder to get to the final position. I'm assuming in racing games, when you're, who knows, low on gas or something, it might make it harder for you to press the trigger down. In Astro's Playroom, there is a claw machine. In that claw machine, when you press the trigger, it's almost like you're breaking this piece of glass. And when you break that piece of glass, it requires a lot of pressure to break it. And so the adaptive trigger changes to become heavier. So you're pressing down on the trigger, and it's very different than when it is on the DualShock controller. Now, after normal use, not even using the adaptiveness, because certain games don't have it, the trigger is just loose, is the best way to say it. And even when the controller is off or on, it feels the exact same. Now, I don't know why a lot of people haven't spoken about this, but if you've read about this before, it's a very weird sensation that this just takes an adaptive trigger and goes back to a DualShock 4 trigger. Now, that's not that big of a deal, but when you're expecting a next-gen console to have next-gen features, that's a big deal. Because these next-gen features are now no longer working on my controller. Sony has yet to release any kind of statement that allows for support to send this controller in for fixing. Now, you may remember from the Joycon, the Joycons now are free of charge to fix the drift. Of course, the DualSense controller also has drift on its own joystick. Hopefully soon, Sony will come out with something that speaks about this dead trigger phenomenon, and we'll get answers soon. If you want to read more about this trigger issue, I'm going to put that article by Comic Book down in the comment section below. But for now, I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.